So, in this lecture, we would discuss another aspect of election and representation, and that is relating to universal suffrage. And while discussing universal suffrage, we would like to discuss those arguments in favor of universal suffrage. So, the very adherent supporters of universal suffrage, as they argue, since democracy implies popular sovereignty, suffrage must be universal. When every individual has the right to take part in constituting and conditioning the government, popular sovereignty becomes meaningful. And the second argument they let out, what touches all must be decided by all. The laws and policies of the state affect everybody. Hence, everybody must have the right to vote, in exercising which each in fact indirectly takes part in the shaping of state policy. And the third argument in support of universal suffrage is that if the suffrage is limited to a particular class, it means, in fact, that the contrary will be governed for the benefit of that class only. A restricted bureaucrat cannot ensure the welfare of the masses. Those who are deprived of suffrage are also deprived of the benefits of government. And exactly as Professor Lasky expressed, that exclusion from power means exclusion from the benefits of power. History abounds in such examples that prove that once the masses are deprived of political rights, the conduct of public affairs is never in harmony with their needs. And the fourth argument they led in favor of universal suffrage is that universal suffrage is also necessary for the most complete development of individual personality and worth. The dignity and self-respect of the individual are enhanced by the opportunity for self-expression in public affairs. If the citizen is granted the right to vote and thus to constitute the government, he will take interest in political questions. Thus, universal suffrage promotes universal political consciousness. And so now we'll discuss about those opponents who led their views against universal suffrage. So among the opponents, as we found, the aristocratic argument, so writers like Macaulay, Leahy, and Sir Henry Mann consider it unwise and dangerous to extend the franchise to the ignorant masses. According to Lord Macaulay, if the universal suffrage were introduced in England, a few half-naked fishermen would divide with the owls and foxes the ruins of the greatest of European cities. Leahy, in his work Democracy and Liberty, denounced the system of universal suffrage, as he could not reconcile with the view that progress could be ensured under a government why the ignorant rather than the intelligent, that the ultimate source of power should belong to the poorest, the most ignorant, the most incapable, who are necessarily the most numerous, is according to him a theory which assuredly reverses all the past experiences of mankind, and according to Sir Henry Mann, universal suffrage is inimical to scientific progress. It is fortunate for mankind, as Sir Henry Mann believed, that the major scientific inventions took place prior to adoption of universal suffrage. In his opinion, universal suffrage, which today excludes free trade from the United States, would certainly have prohibited the spinning jenny and the power loom. Much of these statements are, of course, highly exaggerated also. There is no evidence to show that universal suffrage is an obstacle to progress. Still, these criticisms reveal a significant truth. If the people are given the right to constitute the government, they should be properly trained up and made fit for the job. There is a great truth in John Stuart Mill's remark that universal education must precede universal enfranchisement. And now we'll go to discuss the second argument, and that is the property owning and tax paying test applied regarding universal suffrage. So, in the 19th century, the main qualification for franchise was the possession of property or the payment of taxes. The property owning and tax paying tests are also in operation in some of the American states. As Professor Feiner points out, two main reasons were advanced for property qualification. One was that the possession of property was a trustworthy indication that its possessor was educated, and therefore the component to pronounce upon public affairs. The other was that if those who had no property were enfranchised, there would be an end to private property. Regarding the tax paying qualification, John Stuart Mill's argument was that it is important that the assembly which votes the taxes, either general or local, should be elected exclusively by those who pay something towards the taxes imposed. Those who pay no taxes, disposing by their votes of other people's money, have every motive to be lavish and not to economize. The voting of taxes by those who do not themselves contribute is a violation of the fundamental principle of free government. So representation should be coextensive with taxation. And now we'll discuss the third argument against universal service is regarding educational qualification. So many writers have favored educational test for voting. It is accepted as a measure of electoral ability. As John Stuart Mill, its best known advocate of this theory, wrote, I regard it as wholly inadmissible at that any person should participate in the suffrage without being able to read and write. And I will add, far from the common operation of arithmetic, educational qualification for the franchise has been laid down in the constitutions of some state. For instance, the constitution of Brazil and Chile exclude illiterates from the voting right. Literacy tests for voting have been in vogue in some of the American states. The tests are rather simple, like the ability to read and the interpretation of the Constitution and the writing of the applicant's name. So now we'll go to quote Professor Lasky, as he said, in the modern world, broadly speaking, opportunity is a matter of parental circumstance. Boys of a certain social status may assume that they will pass from the secondary school to the university. Boys whose parents are broadly manual workers will, in the vast majority of cases, be inevitably destined to manual work also, as it was expressed by Professor Lasky in his important famous work, A Grammar of Politics. So now we will discuss another argument against universal suffrage by the opponents, and that is relating to sex qualification. So, as regarding that, the political enfranchisement of women in quite a recent phenomenon, the exclusion of women from the suffrage was the general rule even after the democratic movement had led to the enfranchisement of the masses. It is due to the fact that as Professor Gettle points out, political authority in its origin was closely connected with military power, and in many early political societies, the freedom in arms formed the electorate. This association of political power with military service excluded women from active participation. So it was further perpetuated even after the emergence of the modern states by the general economic and legal dependence of women. The earlier discrimination against them was gradually removed owing to their increasing employment in different professions and their equal access to educational opportunity. In the context, we found eminent reformers like John Stuart Mills and also held the brief political parties in their zeal for the support of the newly enfranchised did much to emancipate women. Thus, in most of the states today, women have been given equal political rights with men. And now we will discuss the arguments against women's suffrage. As Professor Herman Feiner points out, female disfranchisement arose out of no rational consideration of women's need to participate in political activity, but out of general social position of women as determined by sexual role, family life, and religious tenets. Thus, as Professor Blanchils remarked, women's suffrage, by bringing women into politics, tend to disturb family life. For the welfare of the family depends more upon the wife than upon the husband. And his second argument that it was held that if a wife voted differently from her husband, it would introduce discord inside the family. And the third argument against women's suffrage, as it was forwarded by Professor Blanchil, in the Catholic states, the opponents of female suffrage feared that the enfranchisement of women would result in the rule of the Jesuit class, since the opinions of women would be easily influenced by the Catholic priest. This was one of the reasons for the disenfranchisement of women, infants in past. And fourthly, the argument against women's suffrage, it was that since women were physically unfit for discharging all the duties and obligations of citizenship, especially military service, they had no claim to its privileges. And the fifth argument laid down against women's suffrage is that the presence of women in the political arena was not very much liked, on the ground that women would, in most cases, be guided by sentiment rather than reason. Also, their presence might create distraction that would hinder smooth administration of public affairs. And as regarding arguments in favor of women's suffrage, the advocates of women's suffrage have answered these criticisms in various ways. They pleaded that military argument could not be applied to countries where military service was mainly voluntary. Secondly, since law operates as much on men as on women, the government cannot be constituted only by men. Women must be given the right to vote as the means for voicing their particular needs and requirements. As John Stuart Mill said, I consider it to be entirely relevant to political rights as difference in height or in the color of the hair, if there be any difference. Women require it more than men, since being physically weaker, they are more dependent on law and society for protection. And thirdly, as it was urged that entrance of women into political area would elevate the tone of public life, it would exert a purifying ennobling and refining influence on political affairs. And fourthly, since women are gradually allowed to enjoy the civil rights like owning of property, entering into contracts, etc., the enjoyment of right of suffrage was found to be logically refutable. Thus, in the very words of Professor Gardner, the advocate of women's suffrage, made it perfectly clear that difference of sex do not constitute a logical or rational ground for granting or withholding the suffrage to a citizen who is otherwise qualified. In short, the criterion for determining the right to vote is not physical but moral and intellectual. And now we'll discuss another important argument against the women's suffrage, and that is against universal suffrage, is relating to race qualification. So, in regards to that, we would like to discuss as racial barriers sometimes work against the extension of universal suffrage. During Hitler's regime, the Jews in Germany were not allowed to vote. And as Professor Feiner points out, in the southern states of United States, almost the whole Negro population is excluded from the vote, either by convention and fear of violence, by complicated and impossible requirements, or by administrative discrimination based upon educational test, as it was expressed by Professor Harmon Feiner. And now we'll go to the seventh argument against universal suffrage, and that is nationality qualification. So, modern states grant the right to vote only to their nationals, those who have acquired citizenship by birth or naturalization. Again, naturalized citizenship does not always carry with it the right to vote. And now we'll go to the eighth argument against universal suffrage, is relating to age qualification. In no country is the right to vote granted to persons of every age. As a matter of fact, all states exclude the children and restrict the suffrage to those who have attained maturity. Still, the question of maturity of the voter is highly controversial, as Professor Herman Feiner observes. I have nowhere met with a rational argument concerning the proper age to vote. It has been stumbled into without adequate consideration. As in Soviet Union, the age has been set at 18 on the ground that economic productivity is a proper title to representation, where the age is fixed at 21 and above. The argument is that mind at this age becomes mature to consider political issues soundly. And now we'll go to the last important argument against universal suffrage, is those miscellaneous qualification. So, regarding the miscellaneous qualifications, most states deny the right to vote to insane persons, the bankrupts, and those who have been convicted of heinous and grave crimes. Until recently, persons in the active military service were not allowed to vote almost everywhere. Residents in the country in the voting district and registration as a voter are the most common requirements. So, we have discussed in detail about universal suffrage and those adherent supporters who put forward their arguments in support of universal suffrage and those opponents who argued against universal suffrage by citing different theories like aristocratic argument, property owning and tax paying test, educational qualification, sex qualification, race qualification, nationality qualification, age qualification, and lastly, miscellaneous qualification. So, in our next upcoming lecture, to discuss the very methods of election as we found by analyzing the different theories and practice followed in different legal systems and political systems throughout the world.